They say the little cruelties are the ones that kill you slow. But some mornings, one act rips everything wide open. The morning sun was barely up when I heard the crash, a sharp, glass-breaking sound that yanked me out of routine. I grabbed the dish towel and ran outside before I could think. My life was scattered across the front yard. Old photo frames lay face down in the grass. My husband's toolbox was open, tools glittering in the dawn. The box with my wedding dress sat ripped and splayed, lace peeking like something betrayed. Clara stood in the middle of the mess, arms crossed, that cold, practiced smile on her face. "Good morning, Mother," she sang. "We're doing some spring cleaning, getting rid of old junk." "My things aren't junk," I said, voice steady even though my chest felt like it might cave in. She shrugged. "David said we needed more space. This house isn't a museum. Half this stuff is broken anyway." She kicked a box and a frame flipped, the glass spiderwebbing. The old clock toppled. The glass face split with a sound that landed on me like a punch. That clock had ticked through our life, births, funerals, late-night talks at the kitchen table. Seeing it break felt like watching a piece of him shatter right there. David came out on the porch, torn in two directions. "I told you to wait until I got back," he said, voice thin and apologetic. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," Clara said, dismissive. "I was just helping. Your mother's too old to sort through that stuff herself." Too old. The words were designed to sting. For months I'd swallowed small slights, the little digs about my clothes, the way she rearranged the kitchen as if my hands didn't belong there. I'd wanted peace. I'd wanted to protect my son's marriage. But this was a different level. This was a deliberate erasure. I walked into the yard and looked her in the eye. "You'll regret doing this, Clara," I said, my voice low. Her smirk faltered for a beat. "Is that a threat, Mother?" "No," I answered, turning back toward the house. "It's a promise." Courage, I've learned, doesn't always roar. Often it's the quiet decision to stop letting someone take what's yours. I had practiced patience for months because I loved my son, because I wanted dinners to stay calm, because families get messy. But hauling my past into the dirt was beyond patience. It was disrespect. We brought the broken frames inside. David hovered, offering the kind of apology that sounded like he was trying to glue both worlds back together. Clara watched with arms folded like a director waiting for applause. Mrs. Langley from next door came over after hearing the commotion. Her face was open and kind. She had seen our holidays and bad winters. "My word," she said, taking in the scattered pictures. We gave her the tidy version, just clearing out. I could see her glance at me and notice the faint discoloration along my sleeve, the tired set of my jaw. Her eyes asked the unspoken thing, "Why didn't you call me sooner?" The truth isn't tidy. I'd loved my son fiercely, and for a while I'd let small harms slide for the sake of seeming normal. Maybe I'd misread loyalty for silence. But there's a line between bending for family and being erased. When someone tosses your memories into the yard, that line is crossed. That afternoon, I sat with the things that were still salvageable. Letters, a faded ticket stub from our honeymoon, a photograph where his laugh caught the sun, small anchors of a life. It wasn't about the objects themselves. It was about what they represented: respect, history, a life built together. David tried to fix things the way some men do, practical and fast. "I'll get it repaired, I'm sorry," he said. He looked like a man pulled two ways, toward his wife's dismissal and toward his mother's stunned hurt. His confusion didn't excuse her cruelty. Clara rolled her eyes at me. "You're making a scene," she said. Classic gaslighting: minimize the harm, make the hurt person feel unreasonable. She'd used that trick before, smoothing rough edges until I began to doubt my own reactions. That evening I started a list. Not a letter to her, not a speech, a ledger, dates, items, the memory tied to each object. Names of people who remember. If she wanted to erase our history, I would keep a record. I wrapped a few undamaged keepsakes carefully, folded the wedding dress and tucked the lace away, running my hand over it like a talisman. Small rituals help steady you. Tucking memories into tissue paper felt like reclaiming a part of him. I made calls: my sister, a lawyer friend from choir days, Mrs. Langley. I told the facts plainly. My things had been smashed. My history had been disrespected. I wasn't stirring up drama, I was building proof. It felt good to say it out loud, to stop swallowing the bruise. Later, David and I sat on the back steps in the cooling dark. He said, "I didn't mean for any of this." His voice was small. "I thought clearing clutter would help. choice matters. He had chosen her actions without asking how that would feel to me. That choice carried consequences. I lay awake that night replaying the day, the sound of glass, Clara's smile, the clock's broken hands, and the promise I'd made. Regret and threat are two sides of a coin, but promises outlast threats. I was done letting my life be negotiable. Before sleep finally found me, I mapped a plan in my head, the practical, quiet kind. Names to call, papers to gather, neighbors I could trust. A lawyer's number tucked into my phone. Small steps that added up to armor. I wasn't planning a spectacle, I was building a record and a defense. This wasn't about drama, it was about history and respect. Clara had crossed a line by turning our life into trash on a sunny morning. I wasn't going to let her rewrite our story. Rehook, people expect fireworks when a fight begins. Mostly it's quiet resolve that wins, and I was ready to be quietly relentless. Some battles aren't fought with words or weapons, they're fought in silence behind closed doors where every glance and gesture becomes a war tactic. For the next few days, the house felt like a battlefield, one where no one raised their voice, yet every sound was a shot fired. Clara drifted around like a queen in exile, her anger cold and deliberate. She didn't need to scream anymore. The quiet contempt in her tone did more damage than shouting ever could. She cooked her own meals, slammed cabinet doors for punctuation, and left the sink piled high with dishes she refused to wash. Every time I entered the kitchen, she would look up from her phone, smirk faintly, and say, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you there." Her voice had that false sweetness, the kind that hides poison underneath. David noticed the tension, but he didn't understand it, or maybe he didn't want to. "Mom, please," he said one evening, rubbing his temples. "Just ignore her, she's under pressure from work." She didn't mean everything she said. I stared at my son, the same boy who once cried in my arms over scraped knees, now a man who couldn't see cruelty when it was standing right in front of him. "She didn't mean it," I repeated softly. "David, she threw your father's memories into the dirt. That wasn't stress, that was intention." He sighed, looking away. "I just want both of you to get along." I wanted that too once. But peace cannot exist where respect has been buried. You can't build harmony on the bones of humiliation. From that night on, I stopped waiting for Clara to change. Instead, I started watching closely. It began with small things. The mail, she always grabbed it first. Bills, bank letters, even old pension notices, she sorted through them before David ever saw a thing. When she handed him the stack, certain envelopes were always missing. Then there was money. The way her tone turned syrupy sweet when she wanted something new, a gold bracelet, a spa retreat, a kitchen remodel. She'd smile, touch David's arm, and say, "You work so hard. Don't we deserve something nice?" Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, I caught her glancing toward my jewelry box, the one with the emerald brooch my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary. That look wasn't admiration. It was calculation, and every night the air between us grew heavier. One night I woke to the faint sound of footsteps, slow, careful, too light to be David's. I sat up, listening, the creak of a floorboard. The soft click of something opening. I slipped out of bed and stepped into the hall, my heart pounding quietly but firmly in my chest. Clara stood near the cabinet, her phone flashlight flickering over the wooden chest where I kept family keepsakes. Her hand was deep inside, rummaging through old documents. "Looking for something?" I asked from the shadows. She spun around, her face flashing with irritation before her mask slid back into place. "Oh," she said lightly, "you startled me. I was just checking if there's room for some extra linens." In my private chest, my voice stayed calm, but each word carried weight. She smiled, that brittle, empty smile. "You really need to relax, Mother. It's not like you have any secrets worth keeping." She brushed past me, perfume lingering like smoke, and walked away. I stood there, staring at the half-open chest, and realized what I had tried not to admit. Clara wasn't just disrespectful. She was dangerous. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in bed, the clock ticking like an accusation, shadows crawling across the walls. Every small creak of the house felt like a warning. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I went to my closet and pulled out a small box wrapped in a faded scarf. Inside was a document I hadn't touched in years, the house deed, still in my name. I ran my fingers over the embossed letters, feeling power pulse through the paper. For years, I'd let them live here rent-free, telling myself it was for David's comfort, for family unity. But now that kindness had turned into weakness, one she was eager to exploit. I looked out the window at the yard, the same one where my memories had been tossed like garbage, and whispered, "She thinks she's in charge. Let's see how long that lasts." The sun crept up slowly, washing the house in pale gold. But the warmth didn't reach me. Beneath that calm light, I could feel it, a quiet war brewing. She had drawn the first line. Now it was my turn to draw the last. Every empire built on deceit eventually collapses, and this house, my house, was about to learn who truly owned its walls. Sometimes, evil doesn't come crashing through your door, it tiptoes in, wearing a smile, whispering sweet lies until it's already sitting at your table. A week later, I found the first real crack in Clara's pretty little act. It started with an ordinary envelope, a letter from the city office. Nothing unusual at first glance, just another reminder about property taxes. But as I tore it open, another slip of paper fluttered out. It wasn't part of the standard form. It was handwritten in neat, looping blue ink. "Mrs. Hayes, please confirm if you authorized the address change for your property." I froze, my pulse thudding in my ears. Address change. I never filed for that, never even thought about it. My hands trembled as I grabbed the phone. The number for the city clerk was printed at the top of the letter, and I dialed it before I could think twice. "City Property Office, this is Linda," came the polite voice on the other end. "This is Margaret Hayes," I said, trying to sound calm. "I just received a letter asking me to confirm an address change for my property. I didn't authorize any such request." There was a pause, papers shuffling, a keyboard clicking in the background. "Let me check that for you, ma'am. Ah, yes, I see the submission here. It was filed online last Thursday." My heart sank. "Filed by whom?" She hesitated, her tone careful now. "It was submitted using your name and identification number, but the contact email associated with the account isn't yours." My grip tightened on the phone. "Whose is it?" She sighed softly. "It's registered under a Clara Hayes." I couldn't breathe. The world tilted a little, like the air had been sucked out of the room. "Thank you," I whispered, hanging up before my voice could crack. For a long time, I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at that letter. The truth hit me like a slow, cruel wave. Clara wasn't just disrespecting me anymore. She was trying to erase me. She wanted my home. My husband's legacy. The one place that still felt like mine. By the time David came home that evening, I had the letter laid out on the table like a piece of evidence in a trial. "David," I said quietly, "we need to talk." He frowned, noticing my tone. "What's wrong?" I slid the note toward him. "The city clerk sent this. Someone tried to change the ownership records of this house using my name." He blinked, confusion turning into disbelief. That can't be right." "It can," I said, "and it was done from an account under Clara's email." His jaw tightened. "No, that's impossible. There must be a mix-up." "Then explain it," I said, my voice sharper now. "Explain why her name is on my property records." He didn't answer, just stared at the paper like it might rewrite itself if he looked long enough. Finally, he said, "I'll talk to her." He went upstairs, his footsteps heavy. I stayed downstairs, sitting in the dim light, my heart pounding. And then the storm began. Her voice first, shrill, defensive, full of venom. "Why would you even touch my mother's property papers?" David demanded. "Because she doesn't need that house," Clara spat. "She's old, David. She should move to a retirement home. You and I need space. She's clinging to something that should be ours." I closed my eyes, every word slicing through me. Then David's voice came, cold, steady, final. "It's not ours, it's hers." A sharp silence followed. Then the sound of a door slamming, footsteps storming down the stairs. David appeared in the doorway, pale, shaken, his eyes full of disbelief. He didn't need to say a word, I already knew. "She admitted it, didn't she?" I asked softly. He nodded, swallowing hard. "You were right, Mom." I reached for his arm, feeling his hand tremble under mine. "Now you understand, son. Sometimes love blinds us to evil until it's too late." He nodded again, eyes clouded with guilt and anger. "I'll fix this," he said. "I'll make it right." But as he walked away, I knew the truth. People like Clara don't stop because you catch them. They stop only when they lose everything they're trying to steal. That night, I locked my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the shadows dancing on the walls. "She wanted war," I whispered to myself, my voice steady now. "Now she'll have it." Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance, low and heavy, like the earth itself was warning her what was coming. When someone tries to take everything you've built, they forget one thing: you didn't survive this long by being naive. You survived by knowing when to fight back. Some storms don't rumble in the sky, they start in silence, right under your own roof, waiting for the moment you finally decide you've had enough. The days after Clara's exposure were heavy with silence, not peace, but the kind that hums with tension. The kind where every sound feels like a warning. Clara stopped speaking to me altogether, but her eyes, oh, they said everything. Every glance was fire and poison, daring me to break first. David moved like a man torn in half. He'd drift from one room to another, trying to keep his balance between loyalty and truth, between the mother who raised him and the woman who'd fooled him. But beneath all that quiet, I could feel it. The next move, the next attack. And sure enough, it came on a Thursday afternoon. I had just returned from the grocery store, bags in hand, humming softly to myself. But when I pulled into the driveway, my heart froze mid-beat. Everything, my boxes, my framed photos, my husband's tools, my wedding china, even his favorite armchair, was scattered across the front yard like a yard sale of humiliation. The old photo of my wedding day was half buried in dirt, the glass shattered. My life, the pieces of it, laid bare for the neighbors to see, and there she was. Clara, standing on the porch with her arms crossed, her hair pulled back tight, lips painted in that cruel shade of red that always meant trouble. "Well," she said with a fake sweet smile, "took you long enough. Thought you might want to see what clutter looks like up close." I didn't move, didn't blink, I just stared at her. "That's not clutter," I said softly. "Those are memories." She tilted her head, voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Oh, come on, mother, let's be real. Half this stuff belongs in a thrift store. We're just doing some spring cleaning." Her words hit harder than any slap could. And then when she nudged my late husband's chair with her foot, laughing, something inside me went still. "Trash," she said coldly. "I'm cleaning up the house." I stepped closer, my voice low and calm. "That chair," I said, "belonged to your father-in-law, the man whose son you married, the man you'll never be worthy to speak of." She scoffed, her tone icy. "Then maybe it should have been buried with him." For a split second, the world turned red. I could have screamed, I could have slapped that smirk right off her face, but instead I smiled. The kind of smile that means you've already lost, you just don't know it yet. "Pick it up," I said. "Every single thing." She laughed, that sharp, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. "Or what? You'll call David, please, he's at work. This is our house now, I can do what I want." "Our house?" I repeated quietly, stepping closer. "You sound very sure of that?" Her grin widened as she pulled a folded document from her purse and waved it like a trophy. "See this? David already signed the refinancing forms. His name's on the mortgage now. Yours isn't." I took the paper from her hand, scanning it slowly. The logo, the formatting, the signature, and then I smiled, because I recognized it, not mine, a forgery, her forgery. I looked up at her, her confidence cracking just a little under my calm stare. "You made a mistake, Clara," I said softly. "You forgot something." Her brow furrowed. "What? There is no mortgage to refinance." She blinked, confused. "This house," I continued, "was paid off years ago. There hasn't been a mortgage on it since before you even met my son." Her face went pale. "That's not possible." "Oh, it's not just possible," I said, handing the paper back. "It's public record. You can call the county office if you'd like, or maybe your lawyer will enjoy explaining how you forged legal documents." For once, Clara had no words. Just a trembling lip and that twitch in her jaw, the one she got when she realized she'd been outplayed. I leaned in, my voice low enough for only her to hear. "You wanted a fight. You picked the wrong woman." Then I turned, picked up my husband's chair, and carried it back inside. By the time David came home, the yard was spotless, not because of her, but because of me. Every box, every frame, every piece of my life was right back where it belonged. He looked around, confused. "What happened out there?" I handed him the forged paper. He unfolded it slowly, reading in silence, and then realization hit him like a punch to the chest. "Mom," his voice cracked. "Where did she even?" "She tried to forge your signature too," I said gently. "She wanted control of everything, the house, the name, the money, but now she's going to lose them all." David sank into a chair, the weight of truth finally catching up to him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. I rested a hand on his shoulder. "Don't be, just keep your eyes open this time." Outside, the wind began to howl, sweeping across the lawn, rattling the windows. The storm was coming again, but this time I wasn't scared. This time I was ready. When you take everything from a woman who's already lost the world once, you don't break her, you just remind her how to fight. They say the truth sets you free, but sometimes it burns everything around you before it does. Morning light spilled through my kitchen window, quiet and cold like a stranger who knew too much. I'd barely slept. My mind replayed every word, every sneer, every forged signature. But this time I wasn't trembling. I was done being the woman who stayed quiet to keep the peace. By 9, I was sitting across from Mr. Lewis, my old lawyer, the same man who'd helped settle my husband's estate years ago. He hadn't changed much, just a few more wrinkles and that same sharp glint in his eye that could slice through any lie. He listened as I told him everything, the fake refinancing forms, the threats, the arrogance in Clara's voice. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his brows knitting together. "She forged your signature," I nodded once, firm. He let out a slow whistle. "That's not just fraud, Margaret, that's criminal intent. She's playing with fire." He opened a worn brown folder and began jotting notes, his pen moving fast. "We'll gather every shred of evidence," he said. "The letter from the city, the forged documents, any digital footprints she's left behind. If she's been stupid enough to send anything online, she's cooked her own goose." I felt a strange calm settle over me, not relief, but control. It felt foreign, like standing on solid ground after months of quicksand. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting, I was acting. When I left his office, I could almost hear my late husband's voice in the back of my mind. "That's my girl, don't let anyone take what's yours." The drive home was quiet, too quiet. The kind that tells you something's about to shift. When I walked through the door, Clara was sitting in the living room, scrolling on her phone with that bored, smug look that had become her signature expression. She didn't even glance up. "Where have you been?" I set my purse down calmly. "Taking care of business." She smirked without looking up. "You mean gossiping with your church friends again?" I turned toward her, my voice cool and steady. "No." "Meeting my lawyer?" Her fingers froze mid-scroll. Slowly, she looked up. "What?" "You heard me," I said, watching the color drain from her face. "I told him about the forged papers, the fake signatures. The property scam." Her phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the coffee table. You wouldn't dare." "Oh, I would," I said quietly, a small smile touching my lips. "And I already did." She shot up from the couch, her voice rising. "You can't prove anything." I took a step closer. "I don't need to, you already did that for me." Her mouth opened, but no words came. "Your email," I continued. "Your handwriting, your fingerprints on that fake document, you left a trail so bright, even a blind man could follow it." For the first time since she'd entered this house, I saw something new in her eyes, fear. Real, unfiltered fear. She took a shaky breath, but I turned and walked away before she could speak. For once, it was her turn to drown in silence. That night, I sat in the kitchen, sipping tea when I heard the crunch of tires in the driveway. David's car. He walked in, looking exhausted, his tie loose, eyes red. Before I could even ask, he said quietly, "She confessed." I set my cup down, my throat tightened. "What did she say?" He swallowed hard. "She said she only wanted to secure our future, that she thought I deserved the house more than you." He paused, shaking his head. "But I told her if she could lie about that, she could lie about anything." I didn't speak. I just looked at him, my boy, torn and hurting, but finally seeing the truth. We stood there for a long moment, surrounded by a silence that felt like an ending. "She's leaving tomorrow," he said finally, his voice low. I nodded slowly. "Good." But then I reached out, touched his arm gently. "David, don't hate her. Hate rots the soul, just learn from her." He blinked, his jaw trembling. "You're still the strongest person I know, Mom." I smiled faintly. "Not strong, son, just done being silent." Later, I sat in my old chair, the one Clara had tried to toss out, and watched the rain streak down the window. The storm outside had finally broken, thunder rolling away into the distance. Inside, it was just me and the clock ticking softly past midnight. The air felt lighter, like the house itself had been holding its breath for years and was finally exhaling. Tomorrow, she'd be gone. And for the first time in years, these walls would feel like home again. Sometimes, peace doesn't come when the storm ends, it comes when you realize you were the thunder all along. They say when the storm ends, the world looks cleaner. But no one tells you how heavy the silence feels when the thunder's gone. By morning, she was gone. Clara's car had vanished from the driveway, leaving only tire marks on the wet pavement, scars that would fade with time, unlike the ones she'd left behind in our hearts. The house felt hollow, too still, no footsteps, no slammed doors, no venomous laughter drifting down the hall, just quiet, the kind that presses against your chest until it hurts. David didn't go to work that day. He sat at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. His eyes were lost somewhere far away, trapped in the ruins of everything he thought he knew. "I can't believe I didn't see it," he whispered, almost to himself. "She played me, Mom, all this time." I reached over and laid my hand on his, firm and steady. "Don't do that to yourself, son. People like her, they wear masks that shine. Even the sharpest eyes get fooled when the heart's involved." He looked up at me, guilt swimming in his gaze. "What if she comes back?" "She won't," I said, my tone sure, even though a small part of me still feared her shadow. "And even if she does, she has no power here anymore." He exhaled deeply, a tremor in his breath as though he were finally letting go of months of denial. For the first time in a long while, I saw my son, not the husband trying to please his wife, not the man torn between two worlds, but my boy, stripped bare by truth, ready to start again. A few days later, the phone rang. Mr. Lewis's voice came through, calm and certain. "The case is clear, Margaret," he said. "The forged papers, the false filings, all of it has been documented. You have full ownership of your property. If she tries anything else, it goes straight to court. She's finished." I closed my eyes and let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "Thank you," I murmured. It wasn't victory I felt, not exactly. It was something quieter, heavier. Closure, maybe, the kind that doesn't celebrate, it just exhales. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the sun sink into the horizon. The sky burned orange and gold, like the world was catching its breath after the storm. For once, everything was still. I thought of my late husband, his laugh, his patience. The way he'd always tell me, "Never let anyone decide your worth, Margaret, not even family." I smiled softly. "You were right, dear," I whispered into the breeze. "You always were." Days turned into weeks. The house began to heal in small, quiet ways, the sound of David's footsteps in the morning, the smell of fresh coffee, the laughter that didn't carry pain anymore. David started helping in the garden again, just like he used to when he was a kid. We cooked dinner together, reminisced about his father, and for the first time in years, the air inside our home didn't feel thick with tension. One evening, as the sun melted into pink and gold streaks, David leaned back in his chair, looking at me with that boyish smile I'd missed so much. "You know, Mom," he said softly, "you could have just kicked her out the first day." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Oh, I could have, but sometimes people need to see the fire before they understand what it can destroy." He laughed quietly. "Guess I learned that the hard way," I smiled. "The hard way tends to stick." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'll never forget that, Mom." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and for a heartbeat, it felt like all the pain, all the sleepless nights had been worth it. Because this wasn't just about me taking my life back. It was about him seeing clearly, standing taller, finally understanding that love without respect is just a pretty cage. The storm was gone now. But its echo lingered, not in fear, not in anger, but as a quiet reminder. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought to destroy someone else. They're fought to save yourself and the ones you love from drowning with you. The house was mine again, but more than that, peace was mine again, and as the last light faded, I whispered to the night, "It's over." Then I smiled, because for the first time in forever, it truly was. When the fire dies and the ashes settle, you realize survival wasn't the victory. Becoming whole again was. They thought breaking the crown would end the reign. But real queens don't rule with gold, they rule with grace that refuses to die. Months slipped by like pages turning in a book I'd already read too many times. The house, once heavy with silence and grief, began to breathe again, slowly, steadily. Every morning I threw open the curtains and let the sunlight in. It poured through the rooms like forgiveness, touching every corner where Clara's shadow had once lingered. The roses she had trampled now bloomed again, wild, defiant, alive. I fixed the fence she broke, mended the cracks in the porch, and repainted the faded walls. Each stroke of color, each planted seed, each nail driven into wood felt like a quiet victory. This was my sanctuary again, not because it was perfect, but because it was mine. I rebuilt it the way a woman rebuilds herself after the storm, piece by piece, scar by scar, stronger for every wound that tried to break her. David changed, too. Gone was the guilt that once haunted his face. He smiled again, not the hollow kind meant to mask pain, but the kind that reached his eyes. He worked hard, earned his promotion, and started to reclaim his confidence. Sometimes I'd watch him leave for work in the morning and feel a pang of quiet pride. He had been blind once, blinded by love, by loyalty, by the illusion of control. But he had learned what it meant to see clearly. He had learned from me. Then one afternoon, as I sorted through the mail, I noticed an envelope that stood out. No return address. No sender's name, just my own name, written in handwriting I'd never forget, elegant, slanted, too careful to be sincere. Clara, my pulse quickened as I tore it open. Inside was a single check for $10,000. No note, no explanation, just one word written neatly on the back: sorry. I sat there for a long moment, staring at it. The word felt strange, small, almost fragile, like a whisper after a storm. I expected anger or maybe satisfaction, but what I felt instead was something softer, understanding. Clara wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was acknowledging defeat. That check wasn't a gesture of generosity. It was a confession that she had finally realized what she'd done and what it had cost her. People like her only learn when everything they built on lies comes crashing down. That was her apology, not in words, but in surrender. I didn't cash the check. Instead, I slipped it into my husband's old journal, tucked between yellowed pages filled with his steady handwriting. It belonged there, a reminder that justice doesn't always roar like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like a whisper. Quiet, subtle, unmistakable. That evening, David came home early. The golden light of sunset followed him through the door. He saw the envelope on the table, the open letter beside it. He frowned slightly. "What's that?" I looked up from my tea. "A message from your wife." His expression darkened. "What did she say?" "Just one word," I replied, sliding the check toward him. "Sorry." He read it, his jaw tightening. "Are you going to?" I shook my head with a faint smile. "No, forgiveness isn't a transaction. I don't need her money and I don't need her regret." David's eyes softened. "You really are the strongest person I know, Mom." I laughed gently. "Not strong, son. Just wiser than yesterday." He smiled, the kind of smile that said he finally understood. Later that night, I sat by the window as the house glowed with warm lamplight. The air smelled like roses again, and somewhere outside, the wind hummed softly through the garden. I thought of everything Clara had taken: my peace, my pride, my patience. But I also thought of what she unknowingly gave me in return: clarity, confidence, freedom. You can rebuild walls and replace windows, but healing the soul, that's where the real work begins. And I had done it. I lifted my tea, letting the steam rise like a crown of calm above me. My reflection stared back from the darkened glass, older, wiser, unbroken. "You can throw away my things," I whispered, "but not my strength. You can call my memories trash, but I know their worth, because in this house," I smiled, "I am still in charge." Outside, the moon rose over the garden, bright, regal, silent, and in its light I realized what I had become. Not a victim, not even a survivor, but a queen, one who rebuilt her kingdom from the ashes. In the end, she didn't need revenge or riches, only peace. And that was how the queen reclaimed her throne.